Tracey Edmonds has created and produced groundbreaking projects for television, film, music, and digital media. She served as co-host for Extra TV for 3 years, where she earned an Emmy. Edmonds currently serves as CEO and president of Edmonds Entertainment. Edmonds is also the founder and editor of the lifestyle, health, and wellness media brand AllRightNow.com. The mission of the Black Experience is to tell the stories of successful people of color like you, to empower and inform young people and to help eliminate racism. So, we want to show young people, successful people who look like them. So again, thank you so very much.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to share with you.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things I like to do, one of the things I'm very, very curious about is people's foundation, their families, parents, grandparents, positive or negative. But I think that's where the real, success really stems from those elements. So if we could we talk a bit about your growing up and about your influences and role models and mentors?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up through third grade in Carson, California. And so for those who are not familiar with Carson, California, that is an all Black area. And I'm a child of the 70s. And so we were a rising Black neighborhood where, all the parents in the neighborhood were very aspirational. And so they wanted the best for their kids and they wanted to see their kids go to college. And, back in the 70s, Black households, like in order to be successful, you were always encouraged to be a doctor or a lawyer. And so it was like all my friends, we were all, okay, I'm gonna be a doctor. Well, I'm gonna be a doctor too, because that's all we really knew of, we didn't really know about, things like what I'm doing today, with my career and stuff. We didn't know anything about that. We knew, an actor, actress, singer, doctor, lawyer, and that was about it. So I chose doctor. And so I had, through elementary school, my parents were together. And so both my parents are African-American. My father was, at the time, he was a high school basketball coach. Okay. And so, and he, to his credit, he was such a superstar in my world. We had our own trophy room at our house. And so our family room was kind of a trophy room because he had won so many trophies. He was a really hardworking man. He went to UCLA on a baseball scholarship. So he was a college graduate and then became a high school coach, after graduating from UCLA. But what he did, which was so aspirational for me and for everyone, is he coached at a high school called Verbum Day in Watts, California. And for those who don't know Watts, Watts is about as tough and rough as it comes for inner city in the Los Angeles area. And so, growing up in the 70s, most of the people in Watts were on welfare. A lot of them, grew up in the projects. And so my father, there was one Catholic school called Verbum Day, and they had no sports programs. So my father had this idea of starting the first basketball program at this high school. And so, so he started this program from scratch, became the coach and tried to get kids that were athletically talented in Watts out of the gangs, trying to keep them away from the Bloods and the Crips and all that kind of stuff, and said, hey, how about you play basketball? Let me show you, the world of basketball, and you can get out of here. You can get out of the hood. You can play for the NBA one day. And so he started this, this high school program and took that program to, I've lost count. I can't remember if it's 8 state championships. Okay. And so that program that started from scratch out of nowhere, my dad took them to the California state championships year after year after year. And so I'm a little kid, and I'm, growing up in basketball gyms, they used to dress me up as a little tiny cheerleader, and I would watch my dad, coaching these teams and winning these games, and, and then seeing these trophies come in our little trophy room and stuff. And so, and my mom, was a very supportive, wife and mother, and so she started the cheerleading program for him. And so she took girls from, by the way, Verbum Day High School at the time. I don't know if it still is, but it was all male. So it was all guys.
Okay.
And so they didn't have the student body to cheer for them. So my mom went to the all girls Catholic school and said, hey, I'm going to start this cheerleading program, and you come over here and you cheer for, for this Verbum Day basketball team, and let's just all do this together. And so, it was really sweet for me to watch, their camaraderie and how they kind of had each other's back, during all of this. And so it was very sweet. Sadly, as a kid, I don't know exactly what happened, but, by the time I hit third grade, they weren't getting along so well.
Okay.
And so, so they split up for 2 years, and, it was devastating for me and my brother. I have a younger brother, by the way, who's 2 years younger. His name is Michael. And so just the two of us growing up with our parents, so when my parents split up at the end of my third grade year, we had to move out of the house that we had grown up in. And we moved in with my mother, and we moved to an apartment. And so we had to leave Carson, and we went to Long Beach, California, and moved to an apartment. And we didn't, our whole little world was this little Carson neighborhood for so many years. And we didn't really venture out and do a whole lot because my parents were so busy and stuff. So moving to Long Beach and now living in an apartment, it was a huge life adjustment. Like, we didn't even, there was a liquor store right on our corner. And so it was like, we're going from this like sheltered little neighborhood environment where you go to school and you ride bikes, after school and stuff, into Long Beach in an apartment. And, at the end of the block, there's, a liquor store where, you can buy, liquor, and there's, people hanging out, and all that. So
what was Long Beach like at that time, Tracey?
So at that time, we didn't live in the best part of Long Beach, so we lived kind of in a struggle, type neighborhood and stuff. My mom got a job. I think she was working for a bank, while we were, separated from my father for those 2 years. And so we definitely had a huge life adjustment, because we went from being in a nice, secure house with two parents that you see every day to moving into an entirely different city where we didn't know anybody. We lost all of our friends, that we'd grown up with, in Carson. To, starting at a new school. My mom's working. So now we're part of like after school care, and so my mom didn't pick us up until like, 6 o'clock at night, and then we had to learn, that's when we really got our chores in gear because, she was working, and she's like, look, Tracey and Michael, you won't have to help take care of this house. You're going to have to learn how to cook. So we had, a list of chores, like my least favorite chore was bathroom duty. So that was like, I volunteer to vacuum and dust. So it was like,
I understand.
To try to like, hey, baby bro, why don't you do trash and bathroom? So, but we had to keep the house clean. I had to learn how to like make dinner. My mom did teach me. I'm still not a great cook, but I learned my basics, which was I learned how to make spaghetti and tacos. And that was what I learned, during that time era. But it was a sad time.
Yeah. And was Long Beach, in terms of its racial makeup, was it predominantly black, all black?
No, Long Beach is an interesting city because, there's the black neighborhood, which is North Long Beach, and then there's the beachy, more white neighborhoods and stuff. Okay. And so my mom kind of put us right as those two neighborhoods like intersected. So we were close enough where we could have the pretty Long Beach experience and like, go to the beach on the weekends or something as like a little family getaway, but, we didn't have the money to pay for high rent prices or whatever. So we were kind of like in almost the Black neighborhood and stuff. And so, but I had cousins, that lived in North Long Beach, and I had an auntie that lived there and stuff. And so I got a chance to see them a lot. And, one of my cousins went to, started going to the same school that I went to. But it was 2 years of being separated, from my father. And that whole time, my mother was very sad. It was tough growing up, seeing your mom crying, and so and I learned what depression was. She was all, we'd come in her room and, she was sitting at the edge of her bed crying, and, we were little kids, I'm just like, what's wrong, mommy? Yeah. And she's like, I'm depressed. I miss your dad. I'm just sad. I'm just depressed. And it was 2 years of that. And it was 2 years of saying prayers every night and praying, that they would get back together. That was my prayer every single night, so I don't want to get all emotional, but I just remember, wanting to see my dad. Now, while we moved to Long Beach, my father got a college coaching job. And so because, he'd been successful on the high school level, UNLV in Las Vegas, the head coach was a guy named Jerry Tarkanian at the time.
Yeah, the Running Rebels. Yeah.
Yes, the Running Rebels. And so he had been watching what my father was doing, out in, Bourbon Day High School. And he's like, okay, this guy has something, let me bring him over here. And so, so he brought my father over to be the assistant coach at UNLV. And my father was a really great people's person, really great with, athletes and, and recruiting and things. And so like my dad, brought in all of these superstar athletes, basketball players into the UNLV program. And, they ended up didn't win, but came number 3, I think, in the NC2A championship, and, and did really well. And so, so we'd go out, sometimes, once a month to, try to see him and stuff. And again, it was so sad leaving him, and so, and then they got back together though, by the way, after those 2 years, and we moved to Vegas.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know how difficult that must have been.
Yeah. So,
and if you don't mind me asking, and answer if you like,
sure.
In retrospect, did you have any resentment to either one of your parents? I mean, were you, because you were sad as well, and your mother was sad, did you sort of blame your dad at all at any point, or not at all?
No, I was too young to understand the dynamics of what happened. Neither one of them badmouthed each other. And so, so I was too young to understand. And so I just knew that they weren't getting along. And so, my brother and I were like, well, can't you guys just make up, so, which they did. And they both knew that, as kids, we were really struggling, with our parents not being apart. So they reunited. We moved to Vegas. And so by the time I got into 7th grade, I lived in Vegas from 7th to 9th grade. Okay. And, and we had this amazing life in Vegas, because Vegas had no pro sports teams, right? So the Rebels were everything for that city in terms of sports and stuff. So it was a big life, where that was old school Vegas, where you got a chance to go to the shows, at night. And we used to see Diana Ross and Isley Brothers and, all these, cool Vegas shows and stuff as a kid. So, so that was a lot of fun. And then after that, we moved back to Long Beach. Okay. So we moved back to Long Beach as a family. And so, so that was when I started high school in 10th grade. So, and I guess I should share, I forgot a couple things. Like one thing is, just growing up, I was very blessed and academics always came really easy to me.
Okay.
And so, I, was a very curious child and, I read tons of books at an early age and I was very nerdy and I'd even read an encyclopedia, I went through the public school system, the whole way through. But at that time, until I hit high school, I was in big classes, I might've had 50 kids in my class or something.
That's a lot.
And I was always finishing my schoolwork really quickly. And so I would whatever the assignment was, I'd finish it in 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'd just be sitting there twiddling my thumbs. And so the teachers, were noticing this, in elementary school, this is even in Carson. And so, so they put me into a special program. They had this thing called a gifted children's program where, you had additional assignments and activities. And then they had me kind of help tutor some of the other younger, kids and do things like that to occupy my time. And so by the time I hit the first Long Beach experience with my mom, I skipped a grade. So I went from 4th grade to 6th grade. And so by the time I end up graduating from high school, I graduated at age 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me then a couple of things. One, because you said your dad had gone to UCLA, was that something that you knew? There was no doubt you were going to go to college?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the fundamentals, in Carson, I was, my parents are in elementary school, again, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to go to college, study hard. And actually telling me to study hard was a no-brainer because I loved learning and stuff. And I was being a child of the 70s, we didn't have video games. And so we didn't have, all the Xboxes and stuff.
Yes.
So you had to create, your entertainment. And
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as a child of the 70s, there's a lot of make-believe stuff that we used to do. So I would play teacher, and so, back in Carson, we get out of school, it's me and all my neighborhood friends. We're okay, what are we going to do? Sometimes we ride bikes. Sometimes we roller skate. Sometimes we play kickball. Sometimes we do indoor activities, and indoor activities could be playing school, playing restaurant, playing store. All that kind of stuff. So I was a pretty creative kid, always kind of imagining this and imagining that. And so even when we went to Long Beach, and I told you about that after school care thing, that carried us through 6 o'clock, we had 3 hours to occupy every day. And so my make-believe became more sophisticated. So it's okay, because I was also watching TV and Charlie's Angels was out at the time.
Oh my goodness.
I'm okay, let's play Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, I guess I was like every young boy. I had a crush on Farrah Fawcett. So
there you go. That was my girl. And so by that time I had started flipping my hair, feathering, and all that kind of stuff. I got some Nike sneakers like her. And so that was my girl. So we were playing Charlie's Angels, after school. And what I didn't realize is that I was kind of producing little stuff. And so I was okay, y'all, let's play Charlie's Angels. Okay. So I was always Farrah. I'm going to be Jill Monroe, of course.
Yes.
You can be the Jacqueline Smith character. You can be the Kate Smith character. You can be Bosley. You can be Charlie. And here's the plot. And so the plot is, and I would come up with these storylines and stuff about, some burglar that kept breaking into houses or whatever. And then I'd cast the burglars, and they were always the bad kids on campus, the little bullies, okay, you make a good burglar.
So you were laying the foundation for your career. You didn't even know.
No clue. And I was so stupid and, and anal with it. I'd go to the grocery store and I'd buy the handcuffs, because remember the toy section at the grocery store.
Sure.
the handcuffs, I'd get them little cap guns, you know,
That's
so
funny.
we,
Yeah.
you know, we had all that. And
Yeah.
so,
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
So
So,
tell me then, now you talked about your father and how
mhm,
inspirational he was and
yeah.
the things he did for the community. Were there, when you look back, were there any other role models or mentors or champions who saw something in you, teachers, ministers, neighborhood people?
Yeah, I always there were two teachers. I had the most amazing public school experience ever. And so I know the school system has changed, you know, so much since I was growing up, but I literally had the most amazing teachers and they taught old school, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, you know, they were hardcore in teaching the fundamentals. And so I went, you know, I learned all the math skills early. So I went all the way up to calculus, you know, by the time, you know, I hit my senior year in high school and stuff. But there was a teacher named Mrs. Vandendries, and she was my 7th grade English teacher. And she looked like a movie star to me. Like she always had her hair done, white lady, always had her hair done beautifully, her nails done beautifully, just a classy lady, super smart, but just walked and talked with grace. I used to love to hear her talk and explain things and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd sit there and I was 10 years old, you know, in 7th grade, and she was our English teacher and she was teaching us how to write, you know, and I really learned my writing skills from her, which she was amazing, you know. And so like I had great, you know, at age 10, you know, I knew my introductory paragraphs, my sub paragraphs, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But her whole persona inspired me because she was a lady, you know, and she was smart, she could articulate, she could command attention, you know, but she valued herself. She had, you know, self-esteem, valued herself as a woman, you know, took, you know, pride in her appearance. And I just watched her every day and I looked forward to seeing what she was going to wear. And that woman, you know, really kind of connected with me and with the type of woman that I wanted to be, you know, in terms of carrying myself, you know, to the best of my ability, you know, with class and with, you know, and with grace and, you know, valuing, you know, myself, you know, as a woman, you know, never letting anyone disrespect me, you know. And so she taught me all of those like fundamentals, and she and I bonded. She took a special interest in me, and like even like after class, you know, she'd ask me to stay and she'd be like, so how, you know, how's life, Tracey? And she, you know, like we really connected. And I remember at the end of the school year, she dropped a sealed envelope on my desk, and I opened it up when I got home, and it was the most beautiful card, which I still have, you know, just telling me everything that she hopes for me in my life, and, you know, and everything. And so, yeah, so she really inspired me. And the other one that really inspired me is my grandmother. And so, Versie Lee Moten, and I always just say her name Versie. I don't know any other Versies, but she was just such a Versie. She was sassy. She was from Houston, Texas. You know, she was our matriarch, you know, and so I spent a lot of my summer vacations with her. Like my parents would just kind of like, it was kind of part of the routine. It's like during the summer, you go stay with your grandparents. She lived in Carson. And so now her house, like we always had a 1-story, you know, house in Carson. My grandmother somehow, she worked her butt off, and so did my grandfather. They worked like double jobs and stuff. So they bought in the same neighborhood as we did, a couple streets over, but they bought one of the big 2 stories. Okay. So in my young eyes, when I would go to her house, it was like a mansion, you know, to me. And it felt like so, you know, big and, you know, and again, she was so classy. Like she had, you know, this is a Black woman that took so much pride in her house. She had, you know, special marble floors, you know, installed in her entryway. And it was the only house in Carson that had marble floors. You know, she had chandeliers, you know, she had, you know, beautiful antique gold leaf, furniture and stuff. And they didn't have tons of money, but she would go to like those, kind of like thrift stores or those resale stores and find bargains and stuff, and made her house, a palace. And so, I'd go over there and I'd feel like I'd never wanted to leave. At the end of the summer, I didn't want to leave because I was enjoying so much, staying in this house and being under her. And she still was like, she had that side to her. Beautiful clothes, again, just classy. Like she dressed like those old movie stars, like the Grace Kellys and, and people like that, Dorothy Dandridge, she had that whole little vibe and stuff. But she was a great cook too. She would throw down soul food, and we would eat, every kind of soul food thing that you can think of, things I don't even eat anymore, but I grew up on ham hocks and neck bones and, all that kind of stuff.
And is this your father's mother or your mother's
This is my mother's mother. Okay. And so, so my mother's mother. And so, but we would have, again, these special talks. And so like, she'd have me come in the bedroom, and just sit on the bed with her, and she'd let me play in her jewelry box. I remember she had this jewelry box and she had a little mirror, and we'd try on jewelry and stuff, but we would be talking about life. We'd be talking about what her expectations and hopes were for me. Again, this whole thing about like, know your value, Tracey, don't ever let anybody disrespect you. Don't let a man disrespect you, and stand up for yourself. And, you can do anything you want to with your life, as long as you believe in yourself and stay on course and, all that kind of stuff. And she and my mother, the other thing that I should mention is that they were smart enough to tell me at an early age, don't get pregnant. And so they were like, the only thing, Tracey, that can mess up your life, and can take you off course, is if you, get pregnant at an early age and get taken off of your course, and so like, we're not going to let that happen. My mom actually got me birth control pills right before I went to college.
Interesting. Yeah. So you talk about, you emphasize your mother, your grandmother talking about being a strong, powerful woman and knowing yourself. Where does the role of race play? And, did your parents, your grandmother, was there discussions about race in America and, our situation? Do you remember having those kinds of conversations, Tracey?
You know what, we had some of those, conversations, and about how, there's always going to be an assumption that you're not going to be as good as your white colleagues, because you're Black, but, we know that's not true, and, but know that assumption is probably going to be out there, as you grow up and as you go into your career and stuff. So always be even more prepared, than everybody else. Yes. Always do your best to be even better than everybody else. And so when I started my career and I'm young, and it's scary, no matter how confident you are at a young age, when you're first entering, the workplace, and, you are, a Black woman, and you're the only Black woman in the room, and everybody else is white, and, all that kind of stuff, so I did just that. And so in any situation that I was in, I'd research what we're going to be talking about. I would make sure I was prepared. I would just go that extra mile to make sure that they couldn't catch me off guard, and make me look bad, so those were some of the things that we talked about. But in terms of racism and what I experienced, true story, I was very blessed that pretty much until I hit my high school years, I didn't really experience a whole lot of racism, because I kind of grew up around Black kids and, in Black schools, and so I was always kind of sheltered, and so I didn't really have any, experiences or whatever. But by the time I hit, my high school, which when we came back for that second time to Long Beach, and I went to Wilson High School in Long Beach, Wilson, even though you have Black students and white students, it was racially segregated on the campus, just organically. There wasn't a rule where Black kids had to sit over in a certain area, white kids, but, it was organic. So when I started 10th grade, I didn't know anyone at Wilson High School. So I started my first day of school, which is terrifying, not high school, especially not knowing anyone on campus. And I got there and it's lunchtime and I see that all the Black kids are segregated and they're sitting on one part of the courtyard, and all the white kids are segregated and they're sitting on another part of the courtyard. I don't know anyone. It's lunchtime and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Now, the sad thing is that all the Black kids, their area was right by the trash bins, and it smelled, so they had to eat their lunch right by all the campus trash bins, and have their lunch there. Whereas the white kids, they were in like this part of the courtyard that looked like a park, and it was like beautiful trees and flowers and benches and pretty little picnic type area, and I looked at that my first day of school and I was like, oh, hell no. I'm like, oh, no, we're not about to do this. And I'm not about to go sit by some trash bins, for the rest of my high school career. We're about to change this. And so the first day of school, I didn't know anybody. So I spent my lunch in the library. By the second day, I met a girl who didn't really know anybody either. And so a Jewish girl, actually. And so, so she didn't have anybody to have lunch with either. So the second day, we see the dynamics of the school and we're like, okay, let's just go, and we don't know anybody, but let's insert ourselves into that pretty park area, or whatever. And so from that moment on, I always, had lunch in that area, and more Black people came over to that area to like join us, for lunch. And we started, moving and changing the dynamics and landscape of that courtyard. And the same thing at that whole school. Like there was a song leading team called the Pepsters that were historically all white. And those were the 6 song girls that had the pom-poms that, ran the school and stuff. And again, I spotted that, on my first day of school. I'm like, oh my God, that looks great. And I love to dance and stuff. And so, so I tried out and became the first Black girl. And then after that, like, Black girls, so I tried to change things and integrate things.
That's terrific. I guess I'd like to know why those Black kids were eating by the garbage dump. I mean,
I was like,
unbelievable.
Yeah. But see, that's a sad thing. And my grandmother taught me this. She was like, Tracey, don't ever let yourself be a victim.
Yeah.
So, she taught me the Rosa Parks story, which is what inspired me, on that whole little courtyard thing, or whatever. Yeah. And so like, Rosa Parks, thank you for being an inspiration, because that stuck with me the rest of my life.
So then tell me then, Tracey, now, so when you graduate high school, where did you go to college, and where were you thinking about going to college at that time?
Well, I was 16 years old. And I'll just kind of rewind a little tiny bit. So by the time I hit my senior year, sadly, my parents finally got divorced. And so they didn't make it. They tried to make it, but they didn't make it. So they got divorced. And my mom, my senior year, was very strict with me. And so, again, I had this thing that she was constantly worried, she didn't want me to, go to parties. She didn't want me to do anything because she didn't want me to have a boyfriend. She was just so worried that something was going to throw me off course. So I, had this crazy dynamic where, I'd be a cheerleader at the football team, for the football team, everybody is going to parties after the game. And I'm 16 years old. I was actually 15 until I hit February of my senior year. Okay. So I didn't drive, and my mom, I was 2 years younger than everyone. So she thought I was too young to be doing the parties and stuff. So I'd have to go home, and I felt awful because I felt like I was missing out on all the fun stuff, that went along with, with high school or whatever. So, and she'd always figure out ways to like, you got home 2 minutes late, you're on restriction for the next month, ways to like really lock me down.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. So all that to say is that, so like, I didn't have a boyfriend, and so I was very innocent. And so, so by the time, I had to decide where to go to college, I only wanted to go to California colleges, because I didn't want to be too far away from home. Now, the cool thing is we're getting back to my academics is that, again, God blessed me and I had an amazing, academic history all the way through school. So like by the time you hit Wilson High School, I had like top GPAs, I was 16 years old, I did all the campus, activities, taking all the AP courses, all that. So my transcript looked amazing. And I actually was an academic recruit. And so like I had the colleges that were actually recruiting me to come to their universities. So I got, scholarship offers I only wanted, again, California. So every California school, Stanford, UCLA, USC, Pepperdine, everyone was kind of recruiting me and offering scholarships and stuff. And so my heart wanted to go to UCLA because that's where my dad went. But I had people telling me like, you should, Stanford brought me up for a weekend and hosted me and stuff and did take me to the parties and stuff. And so I had never gone to the parties before. And so I was like, okay, this looks pretty fun. And so, so I ended up going to Stanford and they gave me a full academic scholarship, and best choice I ever made in my life because it was the most amazing experience ever.
Palo Alto is a fascinating place. So, I mean, very different from where you grew up.
Yeah.
And Stanford was, I guess at that time was still, well, it's obviously predominantly white, but how many Black kids were there at the time? Do you recall, Tracey?
You know what? I don't know the percentage. It was small though, and it wasn't huge. And again, there was an organic, almost like a segregation that was attempted. Like, for example, they had a Black house that you could stay in. This house called Ujima, and all Black. And again, and on my recruitment weekend where they had me come up, they had a Black student, host me for the whole weekend, and they took me to only the Black, activities and stuff. And I stayed, I think, at Ujima, which is wonderful. And I appreciate, all that. And I appreciate the choice that you have to be able to stay with people that I think they think you would just feel most comfortable with, because those are people, from your racial background or whatever. But I did decide to stay in an integrated dorm. And so like there was the Ujima experience or the regular freshman dorm experience that had, a mixture of kids of all nationalities and stuff. And I wanted that experience, and so, so there were, I think I had 2 Black kids in the same dorm, as me, which is great, and so like, we bonded, but I also bonded with the white students too, because I really feel like, in this world is much bigger, it's an international, multi-ethnic experience, and I think it's important, not to just limit yourself to only one experience that you feel most comfortable in. I think you got to kind of push yourself outside of the comfort zone to, to grow and evolve, which is what I wanted to do for my college experience and stuff. And so I was in an integrated dorm and had a great time. Got my first boyfriend. My mom knew, she knew what was up because it took me 2 weeks to get my boyfriend.
You were catching up on lost time, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Everything I missed out on.
So I'm curious, when you look back on it, now you're 16 and, most of the other kids in, college freshmen, they're I guess some could be 17, but mostly 18, maybe even 19.
Yeah.
And then you're surrounded by obviously sophomores and juniors and seniors. Did you have any difficulty adjusting being so young in that environment, Tracey?
You know what? I didn't. And it's interesting because I remember I skipped from fourth to sixth grade, right? So from sixth grade on, I was always 2 years younger than everybody else. And physically, I was always tall, like I'm 5'7.5". And so I was never smaller, than anyone else,
Okay.
And I kind of looked the part, so I just remember the most embarrassing experience for me though was seventh grade. And we had this physical fitness test that I think everybody had to do once a year. And you had to like run track within a certain time allotment and they would rank you and stuff. And I remember the PE teacher, I was covertly entering seventh grade at 10 years old and didn't want anybody to know. And so I'm now in PE and we're doing this physical fitness test and they have the charts for at 13, you're supposed to run this fast and, blah, blah, blah. No rankings for 10. So the PE teacher announced in front of the whole PE class, Tracey, you're 10 years old, right? And we don't have any. And then everybody's like, oh my God, she's 10, and so that was a horrible experience. And everybody was just like, at school, oh my God, she's only 10 years, so I always tried to hide my age or whatever. But anyway, at Stanford, I didn't really feel, weird by being, young or anything. It was just, I caught up really fast. And so I got into the party scene really fast. I didn't have any problems adjusting with that or the whole dorm experience or anything like that.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell me then, what are you thinking? When you're 16, but when you get into Stanford, what are you thinking you want to study? What's on your mind at that time?
Yeah, so I was still in doctor mode. And so I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And again, I'm just so nerdy. Again, you look at some of these books that I read, and I was always like fascinated with the mind. And I remember seeing this movie called Sybil about this woman with a multiple personality. And
Sure.
I was interested in schizophrenics. And, like I told my mom one time that I wanted to be a psychiatrist and work at a prison so I can help figure out criminal behavior. So it was like, so that's the mode that I was, okay. into. I took pre-med classes for the whole 4 years. And so they kind of let you steer your major. And I was focused on what was called psychobiology. So I was taking a lot of psychology classes and then a lot of bio and human bio classes, as well. And so that's what I thought I was going to do. I was a work study student. So like, even though I was fully scholarshiped, it didn't like cover, food on the weekends or if I ever wanted to do anything or whatever. So I had to get a job. So I worked all 4 years at Stanford. And so my freshman year, I worked in the financial aids department and I was processing, student loans and things like that. And then I also waitressed at an English pub called the London House. And so I learned how to stack plates and, and all that kind of stuff. I did that. One of my other jobs was actually working in the psychology department as a research assistant. So I did that and I got a chance to participate in experiments and all that kind of stuff. So I was, during that time period, like I was on my journey to still be a doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at what point, because obviously you're not a doctor today, so at what point did show business, the entertainment business sort of begin to rise and the idea of being a psychiatrist sort of fade?
Yeah. So for me, we had a lot of, we had a lot of financial problems. I always felt like we had a lot of family financial problems. Once my parents split up, there was X number of dollars back in the day that you get for child support. And it was a couple $100. So, it wasn't very much, whatever. So, so my mom was financially struggling, all the time and still kind of dealing with depression and, and things like that. So every time I'd come home from, from Christmas breaks and summer breaks and stuff, I'd actually try to work. Cause there was always issues going on, for the whole time I was in college of whether my mom was going to be able to pay her rent, and things like that, so I was always, trying to send money, trying to work, during summer breaks and, help towards rent and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of felt, to be honest with you, a bit financially stressed. And so by the time I finished and graduated at age 20, I decided that I wanted to take a year between any kind of med school or graduate school experience and try to sort through some of these financial things that, that were going on back home and just take a break, and so, it was then when I took a break that I got my real estate broker's license. Okay. And so I decided to kind of skip the agent license and become an actual broker. And as a broker, you probably know, you can actually start a business. So you can actually, entrepreneurially, you can own your own real estate company and have people work under you. You can own a mortgage company. You can own an escrow company. And I had some background, in real estate because a couple of my summer jobs growing up, were working for different companies my mom would work for. And so because she always wanted me to contribute to the household. So it might be when I'm, in high school or something, I might be a receptionist at a mortgage company. And they taught me, I think I was 14 years old or something. I was answering phones first and they started putting loan applications in front of me and taught me how to process loans. And I was a quick study. So I was learning how to process home loans when I was a teenager. So I had this background. And so once I got my broker's license, I decided to start a real estate company. And so I lived in Newport Beach after college. And I started selling real estate. So I started selling homes and I learned how to brand myself. And so I was the waterfront specialist in Newport Beach. And so I was a hustler. And so I was getting listings and stuff and grew, a company really quickly. And then I knew how to do the home loans. And so we started a mortgage division where we were financing the homes as well. And so I did pretty well, pretty quickly. And so I was making money, off of home sales and mortgage loans and stuff. And the company was growing and stuff. And so I kind of knew at that moment in time that I was about to shift gears and that I wasn't going to go back to school and that I was just going to start, making money. Now, what I didn't know is I had no idea still while I was doing real estate that I was going to end up in entertainment. And so I did real estate for a couple of years in Newport Beach, but that was a predominantly white area. Okay. And so I was kind of, the only Black woman, kind of doing all this real estate stuff in the Newport Beach area and stuff. And so I did well, but I felt like I was missing out culturally. And so I would go up to LA on the weekends. I'd work in Newport, during the week and then go up to LA for socializing and stuff just to get some flavor, on the weekend. And then I decided that I kind of wanted to move to LA. So now there's this famous story, and I'll try to tell the abridged version of how I met my ex-husband, Babyface. And so that was the life-changing, experience that switched my trajectory, into entertainment. But basically, again, going up to LA all the time on the weekend, it's my birthday, one weekend, and I'm at the Beverly Center and I'm trying on some shoes with my mom. And there's an artist named Pebbles, who was a big artist at the time. She had this song called "Do You Want to Ride My Mercedes Boy?" And she came over to me as I was trying on some shoes, and she was asking me if I was doing any acting or modeling because she was close with a singer named Babyface, and he was looking for a girl to play his girlfriend in a music video. And so my mom always kind of wanted me to be an actress or something. That was kind of like a secret aspiration, even though she did the doctor thing, it was kind of like, still, kind of, so I did dabble in little tiny things, back in the day, like for summers, I did some modeling and that kind of stuff too. So anyway, so I auditioned for this Babyface video, got the role to play his girlfriend, met Babyface at the audition. And then I couldn't do the video because I got sick. I got chicken pox. And so a few months later, I was actually moving up to LA. And the weekend that I was moving, my mom and I took a break from unpacking boxes, and we took a food break, and we were driving past the studio in the West Hollywood area. And Babyface was coming out of the studio at the same time that our car, is passing. And so my mom was like, "Oh my God, that's Babyface right there. Look." So she swung the car in the parking lot, rolled the window down, and, introduced herself, and then pointed to me in the car. It's like, "You remember her? She was going to be, in your video." And he's like, "Oh yeah, my God, we heard you got sick, but did you really get sick?" And I was like, "Yeah." So my mother gave him my business card, my real estate business card. And he called me like that same night and took me to dinner. We started dating, got married. The rest is history. But that kind of changed my world, So I sold, homes for a little bit longer, and actually sold to a couple of celebrities and stuff now that I was kind of connected in that world. But I started kind of being pulled into that world, the business side of things and entertainment, because he was, Babyface was, rising higher and higher almost every month in terms of his success and, winning Grammys and all that kind of stuff. And so because I was his woman, whether it went from girlfriend to fiance to, wife or whatever, so many people were coming to me to get him to do music. And so I quickly, connected with all the singers, in LA and in New York, and everybody's like, "Tracey, can you get, your husband to write this or write that?" So he was too busy to do all that. And I'm a quick study. I learned how music publishing works. I learned how record labels worked. I learned how all that stuff works. So as an entrepreneur, I started my own publishing company, because what that means is I could find songwriters that needed access to get their songs placed. And so in LA, there were a lot of young songwriters that I was connecting with, who were, doing some brilliant stuff, but just didn't have exposure. And so, and I had all these, all these artists that were like, "Hey, I need songs for my album." And I knew, Kenny Babyface couldn't do all this. And so I'm like, okay. So I started a publishing company, and I found these writers, and I started placing their songs, on all these projects and stuff. And so they were getting on platinum projects, and they were like 19, 18, years old or whatever. And so I grew a publishing company really quickly, and it caught the attention of Sony Music. So they offered me a joint venture. And so I had a publishing company, and one of my writers was a guy named John B., and he was also a singer. And so he wanted a record deal. So my publishing company, as that grew and John B. was getting all these placements and stuff, I cut a demo for an album on him and gave it to Sony, and they started a record label with me, and he was my first artist. And so, and he ended up selling 2 million on his first album. And so, so I had beginner's luck on, on that. And so that got me into music. From music, I started doing movie soundtracks, and started music supervising films, putting songs and music into films. And then that kind of segued me over into films, because I started getting scripts, for work, for soundtracks and things. And then I read the script for Soul Food, and they were looking for me to do the soundtrack. And so I was like, "Well, do you guys have the movie, set up yet?" And they're like, "No, can you help with that too?" And I was like, yeah, let me produce this. So, so then I ended up kind of like putting together a cast of just people I had friendships with. And so when I got the script, I was friends with Nia Long. And so I called Nia Long and, Vivica Fox and Vanessa Williams, and just kind of, pre-packaged, this script, and then went out in the marketplace and then, went, "Hey, I've got this great script. Vanessa Williams is attached," and then got the film set up over at Fox. And that really launched my whole career into film and television, and it just kept growing.
That's fantastic. Tracey, thank you so very much for being a part of the Black Experience. It's been an honor and a privilege, to talk to you.
This is the Black Experience for all. If you like what you hear at the Black Experience, please consider clicking on the Join button to support our nonprofit. I'm Adam P. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us.